So I got sober and then stumbled into the culture wars, and I was not in the culture wars. I was a waitress trying to be a comedian, so I stumbled into this, started.
And how did you stumble into I don't know your backstory that well. How'd you stumble into the culture wars, or did they stumble into you?
I started writing. I always wanted to be a writer, and I was living in Los Angeles, and then I got on Twitter in 2013, and it replaced my I quit drinking, smoking weed, everything.
Right.
And I ended up getting addicted to Twitter. But I was like, oh, these are my people, the people on Twitter. And
well, one of the neat things about Twitter is that employers can't test for Twitter.
Right.
Sorry, go on.
And then I started tweeting, and I was just trying to write jokes and thought maybe I would be a writer on a late night show or something.
Right.
I was just using it to practice. And I ended up, somebody pitched me to, Playboy was digital at that point, and they were pretty active. And someone said, you should do something for their humor site. And I pitched, there was this piece going around, and it was about how this woman was like, I hate giving head. And I pitched why I love giving blowjobs. I was like, well, someone needs to...
Maybe they should have, that should be the next debate in the Oxford Union. That woman, the Austin Union, that woman versus the,
They were like, would you like to have a debate about feminism? I'm like, no, I don't like debating, and I don't like debating isms. I want there to be something tangible. I've seen a lot of these debates when you're debating feminism or capitalism, or it gets so nebulous. I want there to be something concrete, like why aren't women having more kids? We can have that conversation.
Well, the reason is certainly not that they're giving too many blowjobs, but
So I wrote. They said you should pitch this actually to Culture. I pitched it to Culture. It did very well. And then I kept begging them for a weekly column, and then they turned around and said, Bridget, we have a great idea. Why don't you pitch some ideas for us for a weekly column? So I started doing, not knowing what a grind a weekly column is, by the way. And I started doing, I had an amazing editor, Joe Donatelli, who I love. I knew nothing about anything. And after I did that piece, I thought that it would be, like, I thought feminists would be on board. But I was a 90s kid who was drunk and then came out of a coma basically into this was 2015 Culture Wars. And I didn't know anything about I knew nothing about intersectionality, internalized patriarchy.
Did you go to college?
No, I dropped out. I dropped out my freshman year, and then I always kind of wanted to go back. And then I was like, well, I want to be a writer, and I would have been in an enormous amount of debt. And I was like, I learned how to do that in kindergarten. So I guess I can just read a lot. And then this podcast has been an education and over the years. And so I really have grown up in public with the culture wars. So I ended up, the left came after me, and they were like, oh, this is your...
What did they come after you for? What was the...
They were like, you're internalizing the patriarchy. I'm like, literally.
I guess when you give head, you're literally...
Exactly.
Exactly.
That was the beginning of me realizing I was not dealing with the same left that I thought I was a part of.
And then it
just got worse and worse and worse for me. And then I wrote a piece, Women Date Assholes Because You're a Pussy, which was universally loathed by men's rights activists and feminists. And then I was kind of off and running. And then as 2015 unfolded, I started seeing, as I became more aware of all this new language on the left that I knew nothing about, pronouns, all of it, it's ripe for comedy, but I didn't understand why no one was making fun of it. So I started making jokes about it, and then I kind of was unceremoniously dumped from Playboy after I wrote some piece. It was just, I didn't get canceled. I just decided to not self-censor.
Yeah, right.
The thing about this weird,
being dumped from Playboy for objectifying women or whatever, reminds me of, we had this Passage Press event at the in DC, which was, almost canceled several times by the management of the hotel, which happened to be the Watergate. And I was just like, well, you wouldn't really want any hint of scandal to be.
It was weird because now during this whole time in the past election when they're saying they lost men, I'm like, yeah, no shit, because all of these magazines were taken over by feminists. And
Vice is another example.
Oh yeah, another great example. And this is and I was there watching this from a front seat. I wrote a very, I thought, hilariously titled article about how I had men mansplain feminism to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had men, and the internal staff like revolted, and I almost lost my job over it for even daring to have men explain feminism to me in their own words. And they did a pretty good job. So that's how I ended up where I am now,